Goeiemiddag, dit is Dinsdag die 20ste Februarie. Ek het vandag by 'n winkel, ek wil dit sommer net gou deel, 'n 6 pak melk gekoop, daai lang lewe melk. Toe ek by die huis kom, toe ruik ek iets ruik verskriklik sleg en toe by nader ondersoek, toe sien ek dit is iets op daai karton en toe nou op die 1 liter boksies ook, wat ek vermoed is rotpiepie, want die store, die pakstore waar die voorraad gehou word vir die koswinkels, is nie noodwendig so skoon nie. En ek het alles toe nou net teruggepak in die sak, so ek gaan dit môre vir die winkel teruggee. En nodeloos om te sê, het ek my hande geskrob agterna, so wees maar oplettend as jy kruideniersware koop, dat jy iets vat wat skoon is. Ons het in die Kongo altyd maar die goed skoon afgevee. Dit is ongelukkig nodig en hier in Suid-Afrika gaan dit ook al hoe meer nodig raak om te keer dat 'n mens siektes optel. Nou ja, dit is nou maar ongelukkig so let maar net mooi op daarna. Goed, ons gaan aan met Destiny. I am so sorry, Tom whispered, barely audible. I have failed her, and you. I tried my best, but couldn't stop them. Joey Roberts put her hand on his arm. It's not your fault, Tom. Leslie Ann wanted to go to the border. She always wanted to do her duty for her country, she said softly and paused, wiping the tears from her eyes. There is no way how her father or I was going to stop her. They were sitting around the kitchen table, the three of them. Leslie Ann's father and mother's faces were distraught with fear for their only child. It was already more than a year since her abduction by the SWAPO fighters, and there was still no clarity on a possible release or exchange date. On the table were the latest newspapers, which proclaimed a possible exchange between Leslie Ann and General Bomba. And Tom fervently hoped that it was not just another false alarm. Something should happen soon, like to rescue her from the prison. But he knew that he could not tell them about the possibility. There were just too many uncertainties. Too much relied on the information that he hoped to receive as soon as possible from Dr. Jonas Savimbi. But even this had been lingering for months. I believe something will happen soon, Tom said quietly, his eyes averted, not wanting to see the hopeful expression in their eyes, the straws they might cling to. At least we have received several letters from her through the International Red Cross. She said she was treated well and that they allow her to work at the hospital. Tom detected the hope on Ian Roberts' voice. We were also able to send a few letters to her. I told her what had happened at your wedding, Joey added. It would make her very happy. Tom glanced at her, saw the thin smile on her lips. We know she has always loved you, Tom, ever since she was a young child, and I thought it would encourage her. I was so blind, he replied. I only realized my own feelings when I heard of her abduction. She will need you once she's back, and I'll be there if that is what she wants. Joey smiled. That's a given. Anyone care for a glass of wine, red or white? And without waiting for an answer, Ian poured 3 glasses of red wine. Tom noticed wryly that it was a Cabernet from McLachlan Wineries, his father's wines. He had never been back to the farm, never saw his father since the aborted marriage ceremony, and according to his mother, neither did his father want to. He had seen his mother several times, but never on the farm. They always met at a coffee shop somewhere in Stellenbosch or Parel. The fact that he and his father would never reconcile was something he would have to live with, made peace with, and accepted. You are welcome to stay over, Tom, Leslie Ann's mother said a little later, and he saw the hope in both her parents' eyes. He was as close as they could get to their daughter, the memories, the hopes, and the dreams. I would love that, he replied simply. Chapter 10. The President is adamant we must try to rescue Lieutenant Roberts rather than to exchange her for a well-known terrorist, the officer commanding Special Forces told the unit commander in front of him. The current talks and rumors about an exchange, as featured in the newspapers, is just a temporary respite to keep the population satisfied. We are still waiting for feedback on her location, sir, Colonel Josh van der Berg replied. We are pretty confident, though, that she will be kept in Luanda or close by. Of course, once we have received more detail, we can formulate an executable plan of action. General Oxtirand eyed him closely. What is the status? Heard anything from Spyker yet? Tom is waiting for feedback, sir. He has been to Rundu for the last fortnight. Is Tom the right choice? The general inquired, lighting a fresh Lexington cigarette. Will he be emotionally stable? I don't want him on the job if you have any doubts. He is one of our best, sir, and even if I would try to substitute him, he will somehow still get involved. The best way to keep his mind occupied and focused is to have him on the team, and so far, so good. General Ox scratched his thinning hair thoroughly. Of course, as long as you are satisfied, I shall go along with your decision. I only hope that we can move soon, and that she is being held within our reach. We must be able to extract from the sea, otherwise the President will have to go for an exchange. Spyker is apparently getting very nervous about the talks of releasing Bomba. He still smarts about the loss of his diamonds. The diamonds are a tricky situation. Bomba never mentioned it during the interrogation. Josh nodded. No proof of that, but Savimbi felt pretty sure that his sources are reliable and that Bomba was indeed sent to fetch the diamonds from Kasinga. And there the spoor disappeared. He was captured without anything in his possession. Jimmy, rest his soul, caught him. It was just before he reported for selection. He always maintained that he found Bomba near an upturned larder, but that there was nothing on or inside it. Savimbi wanted Tom to assist him in finding his lost diamonds in exchange for locating the girl. The general exhaled the smoke slowly. And how is Tom going to accomplish that if and when Bomba is released? We'll try our best to keep him behind bars, General. All depends on how swiftly, if at all, we can move to free the girl. I agree, the General said. Let's focus on first things first. We have a month, maybe 6 weeks, during which we must locate and rescue Lieutenant Roberts. Failure to do so will result in an exchange. Either we will get the girl out, or there's going to be a prisoner exchange. And although the President don't like it, he won't have much of a choice. My men at Langebaan will be ready, General. They are rehearsing several options and different scenarios. As I understood, the Navy is on standby with 2 strike aircrafts. Or rather, 2 strike crafts. If we need a fighting force, we can put them ashore in just about 1 week's notice. It is the President's opinion that it would mean a lot for the morale of the people. The fact that Lieutenant Roberts is a female will make it a political scoop for his party. The General stood to leave. Do what you must. You have my full support, and let me know when Tom returned with some answers from Savimbi. Colonel Josh van der Berg saluted his officer commanding, glanced at his wristwatch and noticed that it was time to depart for Jan Smuts Airport in Johannesburg. His flight back to Cape Town was in just over 2 hours' time. On his way out, he stopped at the signals office and requested the signaller on duty to send a message to Fort Foot at Rundu for attention, Tango Mike. It simply read, "The operation is a go. The diamonds exist. It must still be there somewhere." Commander Amambu, former camp commander of Kasinga, leaned forward at the table, his fist clenched. "There is no doubt. I was there. I saw the diamonds. And I knew the comrade Bomba was supposed to have left the base with the diamonds. Of course, he never reached the airfield. He got caught. How do we know that the diamonds were not taken by the South Africans?" Greenwell Matongo asked. "Because it never came up. It was never reported, nor does any word of it appear in the final reports." Amambu reported. "Nobody saw anything. Not one survivor of the massacre mentioned anything about the ammo cases, and even the escapee confirmed that. Remember," he continued fervently, "our captured fighters were evacuated last with some of our lost equipment, and no one saw ammo cases being loaded into their helicopters." The third person at the table, Political Commissioner Itombi, sighed heavily. "Comrades," he began, "Bomba has been sending us messages from prison. He even planned the capture of our prisoner so that we can bargain for his exchange, his freedom. So if the diamonds were still at Kasinga somewhere, why didn't he say anything?" Timothy Shikongu, alias Mamba, was listening quietly to the conversation, and he experienced a growing feeling of disappointment. The insinuation was becoming clear. Maybe Comrade General Bomba was not the honest hero that he had idolized all these years. Maybe Comrade Bomba was keeping quiet until after his release, offered Greenwell another possibility. The others remained quiet, almost hopeful that this might be the case. Itombi lifted a warm kuka beer to his lips. "High Command is still curious. Maybe we must adopt and wait and see attitude. Maybe the diamonds are still out there, maybe not, but Comrade Momba will have to explain or fetch." Dinu Amambu turned his attention to Mamba. "How is our prisoner doing? Is she aware that negotiations for her exchange are well underway?" "She is apparently doing well, comrade. A valuable asset to the hospital. She and my wife have become quite close, so I receive daily updates on her situation. Except for her cell being locked at night, we are not treating her as a prisoner. Her medical contribution has saved many lives. As can be understood, her emotions are not stable, and I believe that the given circumstances are not what she would have liked. It is clear that she yearns to go back to South Africa. She is missing her people. You will have to accompany her during the exchange," Amambu told him. "It's only 6 weeks away. The exchange will happen on neutral soil," Greenwell Matongo added. "The bridge at Victoria Falls. Our delegation in Zimbabwe, the South African delegation in Botswana, and it is scheduled for 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You shall leave with the prisoner for the airport in Luanda on the morning of the exchange," Commissioner Itombi added. "We shall all meet at the VIP departure hall. We shall fly from there to the runway at Victoria Falls." Amambu stood up to leave. "Keep the prisoner in the dark. No need for excitement now. Anything can still go wrong." She hated the cell. The warm humidity and the endless insects and mosquitoes were threatening her sanity, her ability to cope, to think straight, and she had an intense longing for her family, her own people, and Tom. She had received her mother's letter exactly 1 year after her abduction from the Buffel troop carrier, the one with the news that Tom didn't marry Cecile. Instead, she read how he had raced back to the operational area in a bid to save her, trying to prevent her evacuation into the hinterland of Angola. Almost the utmost despair he had experienced when he first visited her parents. But there was almost nothing to give her hope of a release or an exchange, and her heart ached with fear. How long would she have to stay here in this God-forsaken camp of her enemies, where she was daily subjected to treat them and at night lying awake because of the terrible sounds from the dungeons? The dungeons. They all knew about it, but nobody spoke about it. But to her, the almost constant wailing from the so-called rehabilitation center was nerve-wracking. No patient from the rehabilitation center was ever brought to the hospital, and she knew they were left there to starve. It was this brutality that she found unbearable and unacceptable as a medical doctor. She had discussed it with Gina, and she was sternly warned not to ever mention it, but to accept it as the fate befalling descendants and traitors. And since then, she had slept with cotton wool stuffed in her ears and cried herself to sleep like so often before. There was little to brighten her circumstances except the knowledge that she was helping the injured, surviving from day to day in a never-ending cycle of hope and despair. And then she learned about Tom, and she knew instinctively that she would survive, that she would prevail, and that she would be seeing Tom again. How many times had she dreamed that Tom McLaughlin arrived at her cell door to liberate her from a terrible ordeal, just to see a new day dawning with the realization that such an effort would probably never happen, that there was just too much risk in any rescue attempt, and with despair she realized that only time would set her free. Her mind kept wandering to earlier South African prisoners, the 4 soldiers captured during Operation Savannah, released after 8 months. Rifleman Johan van der Mesh, also abducted by SWAPO, released after 5 years. "Oh Lord," she cried soundlessly with tears streaming down her face. "I can never survive 5 years." And then Tom's face, and she knew that she had to survive, that she had to be strong. Finally, she slept, sweating, restless, and dreaming. She woke, like every other morning, with the shouting of the guards as they roused the work teams from the nearby rehabilitation center and swung her feet off the bed. She walked to the toilet against the far wall, sat down on the rimless seat, and relieved herself. Her every morning routine. Her hair was a mess, she realized, still half asleep, and tried to wipe the strands from her face. At least the shampoo and skin lotion helped. Compliments of Gina Maldonado, her only contact in the otherwise insane world. But she was thankful for the little blessings. Leslie Ann yawned and stretched. The water was cold and refreshing when she stepped into the shower, soaping her body furiously as to rid herself of the night's sweat, almost a purification ritual. And she couldn't help but to notice the thinness of her body. Even her breasts seemed smaller, less full and rounded. She smiled at the thought. How her friends would envy such an effective diet, and her advice would simply be, get locked up for a year. She dried herself with the old towel, the one she had received upon her arrival at Kwanzaa camp, obviously military issue and not at all durable. Then she donned her underclothes gaily colored panties and bra. Obviously bought at the local market, she thought. At least it appeared new when Gina had brought it to her. Lastly, she put on a white jacket, the same as what Gina and the nurses were wearing. And she wished she had a mirror, but that was not allowed in her cell. Still, she brushed her hair as best possible, tied it in a long ponytail. Her hair has grown long, too long for her liking, but nothing she could do about it. The skin lotion was cheap, yet better than nothing. At the moment she heard the key turning in the lock of her door, the signal that it was time to go to hospital, and for coffee. This morning, Timothy Shikongu, her captor, was waiting for her with Gina, his mistress. Over the past couple of months, she had grown accustomed to his presence every once in a while. She knew that he was involved in the training of new troops, and she also had learned his battle name, mostly spoken in awe in reference of a Swapo legend. It was Mamba. And she had remembered Tom's report in the operations room at Oshikati, his words, "Mamba is back," even notoriously known by her own people. Mamba broke the silence. "You know, Lieutenant Roberts, that we do read all the letters that you are receiving?" She nodded, not sure where he was going with the question. "It was from my parents." "I know, but they mentioned a name." He stared intently at her. "Tom." She stared defiantly back at him. "Tom McLaughlin, he is a soldier." Something in his eyes changed. "Special Forces?" And she nodded. "Tango Mike?" he whispered, and touched his upper leg. "You know Tango Mike? You're his girlfriend." "We grew up together," she replied almost cheerfully. "Tom talked about you." "Talked about me?" "Yes. He has a lot of respect for you. He said you are one of the best terrorists he had ever encountered." And then she laughed nervously, realizing too late that she had called him a terrorist. But Mamba was smiling. "Well, I'll be damned. He is a smart one, a true Boer opponent. He gave me this limp," and he slapped against his thigh. "He caused me a lot of pain though, and I haven't forgiven him yet," he said with a grin, and Leslie Ann wondered whether it was good or bad. She had never seen him grin or smile before, yet he all of a sudden seemed more relaxed and quietly satisfied. "You have a nice day, Lieutenant," he said cheerfully, displaying an even row of white teeth. "You too, Gina." The two women looked at one another, not fully comprehending. Then they too started laughing. "Your Tom must be one heck of a man," said Gina, the Cuban. Chapter 11. They called him at 9:30 in the evening. The UNITA soldiers stood waiting just inside the gate at Fort Foot. He had crossed the border into Namibia after dark and waited patiently for the activities in the base to quiet down before he made his approach. He was young, wearing civilian clothes, and was visibly tired when the guards allowed him inside. "Boa noite, como está?" Tom greeted the messenger. "Cousin of the great cockerel, his shadow dwarfs, all other birds," came the pre-arranged and expected answer. Tom led the UNITA messenger through to the dining hall of the Raki base. Deserted at this hour, he placed a plate of food from the Bay Marine on the table. Every night since he had arrived at the fort, Tom had kept a plate with food ready for just this moment. And the UNITA did not need a second invitation. He ravished the food and a beer, and Tom let him be. did not interrupt him, although he could hardly keep his curiosity at bay. When the young man finally pushed the empty plate away, he said calmly, "They are keeping her at the SWAPO detention and training camp at Barudukwanza. Is she okay?" Tom's voice was gruff with suppressed emotion. "Are they treating her well?" The youngster nodded. "She works in the hospital, and at night they lock her in one of the prison cells. Does she appear fine and in good health?" "I saw her myself, posing as one of the local population. I even visited the hospital. She's fine. She gave me pills." Tom was immediately alarmed. "What if they suspected you? Then I wouldn't be here. I would be dead by now." "True," Tom thought, relieved. "And what about Johnny?" "Johnny is waiting for you. No, he is fishing on the sandbank of the southern side every night. He said he will continue fishing until you arrive." "Isn't it dangerous?" The youngster shrugged. "It's always dangerous, but he has found himself a girl from one of the local fishermen. He knows his way around. But he will wait for you from 3 hours after sunset until 3 hours before sunrise, every night for the next month." "I am grateful," Tom replied. "I shall find him there soon." He will make 2 fires, one on the beach near the bushes where it's screened off from the land, and the other on the sandbank. He will wait 15 steps to the left of the fire as observed from the sea. But you must go when the moon is at its weakest. You will have to pass underneath the bridge, and it is heavily guarded on both sides. But Johnny will guide you to the SWAPO camp and show you where the woman is kept." Tom nodded. He had thought as much and was quite relieved to receive the valuable information. "The great Cockerel asked me to remind you of your deal." Again, Tom nodded his agreement. "You may inform the Cockerel that I shall try my best not to disappoint him. I shall soon put Bomba's balls in a vise and start squeezing until he squeals like a pig. Then we can go and retrieve the diamonds. Johnny will return with you?" "Yes," Tom replied. "I will bring him back with me so that he can witness Bomba's confession." "It is done," the young guerrilla fighter said and got up. "I must cross the river tonight. The Cockerel will be waiting for the confirmation." "You go in peace," replied Tom. "We shall meet again," and watched the youngster disappear into the dark of the night. Tom sent a coded message to the Special Forces headquarters in Pretoria. The message was simple: Code Whale 1. The general would know its meaning and advised Colonel Josh van der Berg accordingly. But there were only 2 weeks left before the proposed exchange of prisoners. They were running out of time. They got to extract Leslie Ann before that, so that Bomba can remain in prison. That was the wish of the state president of South Africa. Tom sighed. It was going to be a long and sleepless night. The first opportunity out of Rundu was only at 11 o'clock the following morning. No movement. Harrison Pote listened with growing excitement as Major Connolly explained to him that there was absolutely no movement from the recce's, and neither did he pick up on any rumors of a possible rescue effort. Fort Fire was quiet with very few operators around. "Anything from any of the home bases?" "No, sir," Major Connolly replied from his office at Ondangwa. "I have very discreetly inquired as to any movement or operations in planning, but there was none." "Good," Brigadier Pote replied and slammed down the phone. "Prepare a signal to recall Connolly back to Windhoek," he told Lieutenant Jeremy Kaag. "As good as done, Brigadier." Harrison was pleased with himself. Everything had worked perfectly according to his carefully laid plans. Even he could not foresee the urgency that had erupted since the announcement of the prisoner swap. In a matter of little less than 2 weeks, he would escort General Bomba to the waiting aircraft, and he and his personnel will accompany him to the point of exchange near the Victoria Falls. Dankie dat jy geluister het en like, subscribe, share en die bel button druk. Bestellings vir boeke by die e-posadres onderaan en dan gaan ek môre aand verder met Destiny.